Good evening and welcome to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee meeting, which is February 27th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. First, my name is Bobette Mays and I am the chair of this committee. And so I'm going to ask everyone to give a small greeting to let people know that you're here and who you are and what zip code you represent. I do represent 2803 and 28704. And let's start with Wendy.
Wendy Hayner, 28804.
Elizabeth Likas, at-large member 28803.
Elise Martyr, at-large member 28806.
Sharon Summerall, Vice Chair, 28805.
Peter Abzug, at large, 28852.
Jake Smith, 28801.
And Kim Roney is our city council liaison, and we have our head chair, and we have Meredith, and we have Christina here. And we have with us, we have some staff that are visitors. Well, I don't call you a visitor, but we'll let you be a visitor for a few minutes till you start talking. So I need to get approval of the draft minutes from January the 23rd. Are there any addition? Is there any corrections to anything that was on that draft? So I need a motion to approve that.
I motion to approve the minutes.
I second it.
If the motion has been made and seconded, made by Elise and seconded by Peter, are there any questions to the motion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So if everybody's gotten a chance to look at the agenda for this evening, we do have someone, the Assistant Fire Chief, Patrick is here, and we have Chris finally is here. If there's anything else that we need to add on to that, or we would like to add on before we go on? So I just want to make a brief comment that as these people come up to speak, that if we will wait until they finish with their presentation before we ask questions. That'll help us to move on. So if you think you might forget it, write it down, write the question down while they're talking, and when they're finished, they'll ask if you have any questions and they'll answer it for you. Do we have any public comments?
No, there were no voicemails or
Okay.
emails.
So first we'll have the emergency operations planning and continuity of operations planning updates from the Assistant Fire Chief, Patrick Crudup, Asheville Fire Department. And welcome. Yes.
All right. Good evening, how's everyone?
Good evening.
Good. So just to give you an update, so we have contracted with Percy's consulting company, and we're working on continuity of operation. We call it COOP for short, and EOP, Emergency Operation Planning, as a city, as an organization. What that means for our neighborhoods that we serve is it enables us to prepare in advance to be a better organization for you, the citizens, to be able to continue our operation no matter what emergency happens, whether it's cyber, man-made, natural, whatever comes our way, makes us a better organization, makes us more prepared to serve you, the citizens. So continuity of operation is pretty much whenever disaster happens, how we're going to continue to provide our services to our citizens. Emergency operation planning is just as it sounds. If we have an emergency, how we're going to plan around those emergencies. Every day we have, well, not every day, but often we have fires, car wrecks, medical calls, things we consider routine in the city. With emergency operation planning, those are our larger events that might happen in our city, whether it be weather events, heaven forbid, any type of cyber attack, earthquakes, anything like that. We're preparing. So we're in the beginning stages with all of our departments currently, going through our annexes and our ESF functions, which is emergency service functions throughout our city.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, Wendy.
I would like to ask, how are you getting this information out to the city?
So with the help of our CAPE team and our PIOs, our public engagement, we'll push that through to our neighborhoods, to our communities. They're the experts, so they will push all the information out as we start to develop our plans.
We have so many new neighbors, new people coming into Asheville that many of them don't even know where our fire department is located. Is it something that you could also incorporate with the fire truck, is to go throughout the neighborhoods and let them know where you are, if they need any help and that type of thing?
So we actually have a Citizens Fire Academy. So we encourage our community to come be a part of our Citizen Fire Academy. Not only will you learn where your fire stations are, but you actually learn the functions and services that we provide. And you get to be a part of it. You get to come to the station, sit down and have a meal, sit with firefighters, your city, and ask all the questions that you like.
And that is called, again?
Citizens Fire Academy. And that'll be coming up, and we can get some information to push that out to you.
I think it would be also an amazing thing to put on the neighborhood page, just some links to that, so that people that are going to those neighborhood pages to get information can say, oh, I don't even know where those services are, so.
Good. That's something. Okay, good.
How can we help you?
Well, you invited me here, so that's a start. So what we like to do is make sure that our citizens and our community know that we're here and the services that we do provide, and that if you ever need anything, always come to a station. There's a station close to all of you. That's how our stations are built and designed. There's a fire station in at least one in every neighborhood.
So each station will have some information regarding this code.
So currently, the stations will not have that. They're a part of the development. They're a part of the process that the fire department and the city is putting together, but they may not have that information currently. If you needed that information, you would come through our CAPE program or our fire department.
Which is the main one over here? Is that?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
And Chief Crude, if I can add, we just met earlier this week. I think it was, or last week.
It's only Monday,
Today's
so.
Monday, so it was last week.
Yep, last Tuesday, yeah.
But this morning feels like a week ago. With the team that's doing both of these plans, just as Chief Crudup just shared with us. So we are putting together a comprehensive plan so that we can keep people connected with it and they can get the kind of input that they need from our community to put together a really great plan. So there will be more information coming on that, on the engagement. Right now, they're really focused on internal services and making sure we've got the lay of that land.
And some of our neighborhoods have newsletters. Shiloh will be putting out one in April. I know East End Valley, you have one, and Burton Street has one. So if you could make sure that you get that information when it starts up, we can put that in our newsletters, and that'll go out because we're gonna start expanding our newsletter to the churches too in our neighborhood. So information will get out more. So whenever you all get that settled, we'll be ready.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? You sure? You're positive? I just want to make sure, because I don't want, there you go, witness. I knew it.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question, Mr. Crudup. If we were going to have an event that we would like to invite the fire department, do we do that through you?
So if you call the fire department, you can reach out to our PIO, our Public Information Officer.
Public Information Officer.
That would be Kelly Clope. And give her what information that you have.
Yes,
And we will work our best to coordinate to get someone out to you.
great.
Yeah, depending on what you needed, we do our best to get someone out.
Okay, great.
Yes, ma'am.
We're looking for a neighborhood event for the whole city. So this would be a great opportunity for you to have a table to talk about your project, as well as to have a fire truck to let the children explore.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yes.
Got it all out in one mouth. She's working.
I'm working fast.
And Ms. Wendy, what neighborhood are you?
The city.
The city, you talking about the whole city? the entire
Yeah.
city? Okay, yes,
Yeah.
okay. That would be great.
Yes.
So I think that we would do that, if you're talking about the festival, I think that the city would take care of whoever we need to ask, am I correct?
We can certainly be a liaison. So this is the Festival of Neighborhoods. You may have attended one in years past, but the advisory committee is working to hold another one, and certainly having representation from some of our departments would be ideal. So anything that you all would like to see, we can certainly be a conduit to the different departments to see if they're available and can participate.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again for coming.
Yes,
We
ma'am, thank you.
appreciate the
Yeah.
information. We have unfinished business. Can I have the update from the NAC Bylaws Review Working Group?
You did such a great job on it, and I just finished my edits today. I don't even know if you had a chance to look on
I
it.
haven't.
Peter and I and Elisa on it.
So her edits, but I did not have the time to see yours.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did it the last minute.
Well, to summarize, Peter did a good job of kind of looking through them and suggesting some edits, and I and Sharon have made some comments, and we're kind of just discussing a few more details, but it's,
Yeah, I made some, did you see the edits I made?
I didn't get a
Yeah,
chance
I
yet.
added, we have 2 items that are tied into resolutions, and I added those resolutions because they're voted on council, and if we're gonna change anything in the bylaws on those particular items, then we have to go back to council with them. So I added that we probably should add to the comments in our bylaws, that if anybody in the future wants to change any of that it's going to be council driven. And then I just agreed with your comments. So we'll have a better report next time.
Because I think that when you give your presentation, that we will have to all agree before it goes any further, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not prepared tonight?
No.
Maybe next month,
Yes, we have to prepare like a,
to get your finalization?
yeah, and then exactly show like which wording is changing and changing to what, so we'll have a sheet that shows that prepared before the next meeting.
Okay,
That'll need some time when we go to do our agenda.
okay. Okay. Festival of Neighborhoods Working Group,
It's with you.
I'm waiting.
So we're going to be talking about the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, looking at doing a neighborhood festival. Is this what you wanted me to talk about right now? Okay, because I also have some other things I want to talk about. But anyway, I have been in touch with John Philman, and we have been working together and have locked in Carrier Park. And I'm so excited about Carrier Park for our neighborhood. I have also filled out all of the information that is necessary for the outdoor public space, the event use inquiry, and I have it for Darwa. And I have a question for our group, and that is, what would we like to call our festival? As I was doing a lot of research recently, that's one of the things I enjoy doing is researching. But one of the things I came upon was a lot of the cities around our country call it Good Neighbor Day Festival. And I thought, oh, what a great idea, good neighbor, because that's what we want. We want good neighbors in our neighborhoods, but this is a wonderful way for them to take the information back to their neighborhoods if someone is unable to attend. So that's an opportunity for us to consider. Another one is just a neighborhood festival, but Good Neighbor Day Festival. And that is also an event that President Carter had implemented back for September 23rd as a national neighborhood day. And so what we have tried to do is find a Saturday within that time frame as to when we could have our event. And so there's the 23rd of September, which is also a Saturday, and then the other one is the 30th of September. And we're aiming for the 30th right now. And that will be the one we lock in. I have filled out all the paperwork that's necessary, and have everything right here to submit to DAWA.
How, in what capacity do each neighborhood participate in this? How do they participate?
Okay, what we envision, and this is our vision board, is that each neighborhood, that is a 28804, there's 10 different neighborhoods in that zip code area. What we would like for them to do is set up a table from each of the neighborhoods within that area, and they would all be clumped together so that the people could walk around and find what neighborhood is appropriate for their area, find out what's going on in their neighborhood. What are they doing that would be something that they could participate with? And so that would be, and we'd have big signs saying this is 28804 and this is 28005 or whatever the zip code is, and then they could walk over into those areas and say, oh, well, I'm with Beaver Lake, so what is the name of that one? And so then we can help them direct. And they would also have an assignment, Peter, that the people within that neighborhood would help man the tables and help us with volunteer work as well as set up and breakdown.
Okay. So my question.
We also were interested in adding some organizations. So many people are new to our neighborhoods and they don't know about the Lions Clubs, or they don't know about Rotary. They don't know about these other organizations that are real beneficial for our city. And I think it would be wonderful if they would also have tables set up. I've also had a wonderful conversation with Keith, who's over at Montford Park, and they work with Buncombe County Partnership for Children and have a mobile playground. So this is a modular unit that they will bring out. Keith said he would be more than happy to arrange to have this playground. It's where children can work together and build a construction and have a really good time interacting together. So this is a mobile playground that is done through Buncombe County Partnership for Children and Asheville Parks and Rec. And Keith said that he would be more than happy to put that on the schedule. So that was really great. We also talked about food trucks, having them come and provide food. There's, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, I know there were several things we talked about. We had a really productive meeting about this, talking about how much help we're going to need from this committee, and then liaisons to each neighborhood, and people from the neighborhood associations joining sort of the planning and carrying out some of this. So we did talk about lots of different activities. We did spend some time talking about getting affordable food options, because not everybody can get a $12 taco or something from the food truck, so we really want it to be accessible to everyone. And then one of the biggest things, if we want to have music, is stage and permits and a lot of the logistics around that. So those are just a lot of things that came up in our conversation. One thing I would love to ask is I was looking for a list of all the neighborhood associations, and I went to the neighborhoods with is it plan on a page? That's what, okay, the right terminology. And there were 39, I think, listed there. But we want to be able to, I know, Bobette, you're always asking us to go to people's neighborhood association meetings that are not just in our own neighborhood. And I wondered if we could each take 2 or 3 neighborhood associations and be the liaison to funnel information to those few about what's happening with the Festival of Neighborhood Planning and recruiting for volunteers. So that was one idea. Anything else that y'all remember?
We had lots of ideas, just lots and lots of ideas, and coming back to the group and trying to figure out what you would like to implement and see. One of the things I was thinking about is the majorettes. If we had a team of children of dancing on a stage, that would be absolutely fantastic. Something that shows the community in a whole. I also thought of a mariachi band, some way to touch base with all the cultural diversity that is in our city, and also have them have tables set up so that they can give out information to the public. We also talked about possibly having some downtime and having some yoga for some of the people, and having Asheville Community Yoga do some of that. So we want to include all kinds of ways that the city can represent itself, not only within the neighborhood, but as a whole. One of the things I also wanted to talk about is our initiative as a committee has been given from the mayor to start looking at, I'm just going to say, civil defense, ways that we can prepare ourselves for if there's a type of catastrophe, as you were talking about. And this is another wonderful way to have our police present and talk about things, as well as having the library bus there and having information to hand out to people so that they can take it back and think about, you know, if our water is cut off again, or we have any problems with our electrical grid, what do we do as individuals, as well as what do we do in our community and our neighborhood? So those are all things that, I mean, it's a huge encompassing picture that would be involved, but that's many of the ideas that we had. What did you want to say something, Jake?
Have you been in contact with Mike Sewell at Asheville on Bikes to possibly bring in?
We're just in the beginning
Okay.
stages, but these are the types of ideas that we would like to incorporate. Thank you.
As I sit and I'm listening, and I'm thinking about what is the diversity in all of this?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to think about if I were to engage in my community for young people to come, would they be interested in all the pieces that you're talking about? Or young adults with all the pieces that you're talking about? And that kind of like it makes me feel like it's not designed for us, because it's at Carrier Park, which is an area where it's far off from where the mainstream of communities are for where I live and in that location. And would somebody want to travel there for, how are you going to get people excited about coming to an all-day festival? Because just by having tables set out, that's not going to intrigue people to want to come and stay, or to go home and invite somebody else to stay. So I would just ask, it's not for discussion or to take time on, but as you look into this, you've got to understand that we live in a time where, you know, diversity plays a key. And I mean, I see people all over, and it's not just about one race of people, one genre of people, but for all people. And I would hope that you would go back and look at maybe some things outside of your own comfort zone as to how we can engage the entire city.
Yeah, we had that discussion. Our problem is what was available to us that we could encompass where we wouldn't have to rent a stage, so that we could have, why we were looking at, like Wendy and I went over to Mumford and looked over there, because we need something set up with electricity, and we didn't have it at Easton Valley, you know.
Yes, you did?
No, we don't have electricity. We don't have a stage unless we rent a stage, is what we did.
But didn't the city provide?
No.
They do provide some things, because I know United Way went to Aston Park, And there is a way, there are some things that can be done.
Yeah,
So, without, if you're talking about a stage without the cost and.
Aston Park would
all
be
I'm saying-
great.
All I'm saying is, just go back and come outside of your comfort zone and think about diversity of what you see in Asheville and how to even get the people in the Emma community to come to this festival that they would be engaged in. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, no,
So
we did do that. Our problem is that I didn't know that we had a stage available. We were limited to, if we would have the mayor show up or whomever to talk, that we had some electricity, we didn't have to pay for that, we didn't have to.
But the
get
city will,
stage.
but I remember United Way did that.
I would love to have DAWA.
So I can say there currently isn't a budget for the festival, and it sounded to me that you all were looking for low to no cost things to be able to do. So I can say that. We've got, it's been a while since I've been involved at that level. I think there may be some rental things that we have available, but I don't know that there are a whole lot that the city itself could rent out for events. But that is certainly something that we can get a list to you guys. Will probably be from Parks and Recreation to
Yeah,
see
if
if
you
they're
can
still
send
doing
that to me,
that.
I'm in charge of the physicality of things, of organizing the tables and the structures and all of that. That would make a difference of where we have this, because we were limiting so that we could broadcast and didn't have to bring in a bunch of money to try to set up. Also, the people that, what's the gentleman's name that they sing for the kids? They also have a rock and roll, what do you call it, the rock and roll bus that they bring for the kids as
Mhm.
well.
Keith was talking about that.
That brings the kids into this, and the playground type of thing to interact with kids as well. My main concern is where it was located, and we didn't have the facilities to have people speak and talk and broadcast. But now that I know that we may have something from the city, then that would broaden up where we locate this.
So I would say that whatever you plan to do, always make sure that before you finalize anything, at least get with the three of them and myself before you even start, whatever your
Well,
plans
why don't
are.
you join us in this then, because we sat for an hour and we brainstormed, we wanted it at Easton Valley, but having done a me-organized part with my community, knowing the logistics of what it took to set that up for everything. So, I mean, if you've got, I mean, it'd be great if you have opinions and ideas to come join us on this so we don't head down a rabbit hole and you see us going someplace else.
Okay, all right.
But if we can get a stage or something that can set us up anywhere, then that will not limit us.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that this is someplace that people would say, I'm gonna come to.
Right, I agree.
Because now for myself, Carrier Park is not a place I would say I would come to.
Right,
And if I talk to the Shiloh Community Association, you might have some of the seniors that may come and set up a table. But if we're talking about a festival for community, you won't get my community there because of where it's
Where it's
located
located.
and what you won't draw them.
right,
You won't draw the people from East End Valley
right.
to come. You won't draw even the people from Stumptown, which is still there, some still there.
Right.
So if we're gonna talk about encompassing everybody, and we want everybody to be part of this festival, I'm saying that that's how we have to look at it.
Right.
And so you have to engage yourself and think outside of the box, because that's what I have to do. I have to think outside of the box when I think about everybody else and what they're doing.
Well,
So-
and ideally, because I really appreciate what you're saying, ideally, when we were talking, we would get somebody from every neighborhood association to be part of this planning committee. 'Cause
Yes.
we just got together, the three of us, just brainstorming and saying,
Yeah.
here's a
That's
bunch
all
of the
we did.
possibilities. How do we get more input from people from each area around the city so that if they say, well, I would come if there was this, then okay, then
So my responsibility would be to go back to my community and say that this is what is being planned.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do give, every time I go to association meeting, I do give a report on what's going on in here.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that I would go to my association meeting and I would say that, you know, we're talking about having a festival, but that means that I would have to be the one that would say, okay, this is how I would have to make them excited. You see what I'm saying? I would have to be the one that would be the positive force to say, this is what we're gonna do, and this is how we want it to be, and this is what we want it to do. So that would be what I could bring to the table, but I just want more outside the box to take to the table.
We had asked the gentleman, John Philman, about the front area here, the City County Plaza, and that was taken. And he said the next largest facility I have is Carrier Park. There wasn't any discussion about any of the other parks in the city. We talked about MLK area. We thought that might be a little small.
It's
No, I was
Oh,
concerned.
you were concerned
I
about the
was concerned
baseball
that
field.
We'd have to rent a stage, because every time we do an Eastern Valley thing there, we have the place we can do with food. I organize the food trucks there and the music, is we had to rent a big, huge stage without electricity there in order to
But
make
see,
that
that's a
happen.
budget, that's a budget for Eastern Valley. We're talking about the city.
Well, that's why I just said, I don't think MLK is gonna
So what we'll
work.
do is, we're not gonna labor on this all night.
No,
I wanna go home and eat. So, you all go back to y'all go back and meet,
okay,
and if,
and then I'll give it Dava and.
and then I have a lot of meetings, but, let me know when your
I
meeting
will,
is,
I will.
and, if I'm available, then
And
I
then
will
I'll
have no
have-
problem.
And I'll have more information from what the city can provide for us by that
Right.
point in time.
So, yeah. So
And,
let's
and
do
I
that.
would, I would like to ask everybody on the Neighborhood Advisory Committee to consider, you know, being the liaison about this and getting information to a couple of other neighborhood associations. And, you know, if people want, I don't know, if that's feasible, if that's doable, but people can sort of say, okay, I'll take these three, I'll take these three. I'm happy to coordinate that so that at least we have a focus for, I'm gonna go to this neighborhood association meeting and get input on what they wanna see at this festival, and we can bring it all back to the planning.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's go to our new business. We have Mr. Chris Collins, finally, Planning and Development Manager.
Let me wake this thing up.
Uh-oh.
Good evening, y'all. Hold on. There we go. Scroll. There we go. And it's almost there. Okay. Good evening, everybody. I am Chris Collins, as you said. I'm Planning Development Division Manager with Development Services for the city. And I'm happy to be here tonight to talk to you all about the pre-development community meeting requirements. And what that is, before I start flipping through a few slides, whenever a prospective developer has the idea that they want to develop a piece of land, right? And it's going to qualify as one of our larger development thresholds and per zoning. So that's what we're going to say, throw around terms that are level 2 development, level 3. You probably heard of conditional rezonings and major subdivisions. I'll try and keep those real simple about what those are. Anything that's commercial, that's going to be over 20,000 square feet in a new building, any subdivision of land that's going to be creating new roads or extending utilities and things like that, and any development at all that's seeking to change the zoning when it comes in. So those are the types of developments we're talking about here when we talk about this. Now, a while back, a few years ago, the city introduced a requirement for these pre-application community meetings. And the important thing that I want to leave y'all with tonight, after I go through a few slides and points and answer some questions, is that we're looking to do a text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance. So that's our zoning. That's going to create, and I say create, we have some requirements, but they're very general right now. So it's going to create real requirements for the notification, commencement, and reporting of these required neighborhood meetings. So like I said, it's going to replace some very general code language. Right now, it essentially says, notify everybody within 200 feet, choose a time that's convenient, time and place that's designed to be convenient, the ordinance says, and have the meeting. right? That's pretty much the only guideline that's in there right now. So far in developing what I'm going to show y'all tonight, we've worked extensively with some members of the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods because they really approached us about this from the beginning and said, hey, can you make this better? And it wasn't on anybody's work plan, but we were like, you're right, it does need to be better. Let's see what we can do. But we've also kind of, as a counterbalance to that, we've worked with the Development Customer Advisory Group. So that's a group made up of engineers, landowners, attorneys, developers, where we can kind of say, is what we're about to propose crazy, right? Is this going to make you guys really upset? Just so we know, right? And we've also made some appearances with the Buncombe County Legacy Neighborhoods Coalition to talk about this as well. So we've tried to reach out, and now this is kind of moving through the official channels, and we are starting with the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. So let's talk about these notifications. There's a few key components here, right? There's a radius that's required to be notified, so a radius around the properties. And there is a timing of the notice. So how far in advance the neighbors need to be notified that this individual is seeking to file an application. I should have asked, how many of y'all have received one of these notifications before? Okay, a couple of you, all right. So you know a little bit what I'm talking about. So right now, we're going to start with a radius. Right now, that radius is all property owners within 200 feet. And I just picked a parcel at random. This is somewhere on Charlotte Street. I think it might be the old abandoned, maybe Ingalls owned site, but this is not a real scenario, just an example. So if somebody came in to develop this property, they'd be required to notify all property owners within 200 feet. And in this example, we'll be talking about 43 property owners that would be notified. What we're looking to do, or our proposed UDO text amendment is going to change that to 400 feet. And in this same example, that shows it doubles the radius. It would take it up to 77 property owners that are notified. Now, I'm going to make one statement and ask that you let me explain this in a slide a little later. But CB zone properties are proposed to remain with a 200-foot notification radius. But I promise I'm going to come back to that. All right. The next kind of major change, or change that's going to have an impact, is the notification timing. So this timeline right here shows that right now the ordinance requires that notification that goes out to the neighbors to provide 10 days notice of the impending meeting date. Once the meeting happens, the ordinance requires, ordinance doesn't call it a waiting period, but that's what I call it, a 10-day waiting period before they file that application with the city. So the proposed change there is going to take that notification period to 14 days. So you get 2 full weeks of notice of the meeting coming up. And it doesn't propose to do anything with that waiting period right now. But we haven't found a lot of use out of that waiting period yet, honestly. So it didn't really come up to change that. So once that goes on, so at this point, we've notified every property owner within 400 feet. We've given them 14 days notice that we're going to have a meeting about this development. Those are the things that exist now in the ordinance that we're looking to change with the amendments. We're also looking to introduce some new things. So I'm going to cover a few other requirements and how they are in the current ordinance, which pretty much you're going to see a lot of no specified requirements up there. But as far as the location and time of the meeting, I kind of quoted you what that is. It says the location and time designed to allow interested neighbors to attend. Well, for city staff, that's really hard to judge, right? It's a judgment call. Some of these we can look at. Yeah, you held your meeting in a cul-de-sac in 38-degree rain. We don't think you met the intent, but other times it's a little more gray. The registration of the meeting or letting the city know that it's happening, there's no specified requirement for that now. Format of required signage posted on the property, and even signage posted on the property, that's something that's not necessarily in the ordinance, but we as staff have been telling them that we think it's what the ordinance means. So we've been asking them to do that, but there are no specified requirements. The notice that you get, for those of y'all that have gotten it, if you've gotten more than one, you know it's different every time, so there's no specified requirements for that notice. Reporting back about what happened at that meeting, who came to the meeting, all those things. It's pretty free form right now. We sometimes will get a scribbled in attendance sheet and what the developer thought was the important discussion, right? So there's no specified requirements for that now. And format and best meeting practices, how to hold the meeting, how to record the meeting, all that. No requirements or guidance given at this point. So that's where we are right now on that. And in the proposed regulations, and I'm going to dig into a couple of these a little deeper, but let's kind of overview them first. Location and time of the meeting, we're not proposing a change in the ordinance, but we are proposing to provide a little more guidance and a couple more guide rails there. Registration of the meeting with the city, we are going to be, in this proposal, requiring that they register that meeting with the city. We, as staff, see it's important that this meeting happen between the developer and the neighbors. At this point, this is before an application has come in, and no staff have analyzed it. In my experience, and in years of doing this, and 10 years in Asheville now, and many years other places, when staff get involved early, they tend to kind of be a crutch for both sides, and can often act as a barrier to that communication and what we want. So we want to know the meeting's going on, but it's important for that meeting to be between the neighbors and the developer. Format of signage posted on property, there will be a requirement pros to follow a city-provided template. So every time you see a sign like this, you know what it means, and it gives you the same information. And same thing with the notice that gets mailed. There'll be a requirement to provide, at a minimum, what we provide to them on a city-provided template. Reporting of a meeting, a requirement to report via a city-provided standardized form. I'll tell you why that's important a little later. And format and best meeting practices, and this is a really great part. This is a guide we've developed, which I'll talk about a little here. You can always dig into it. It's on our TRC webpage. But the ordinance itself would contain a requirement that the developer follow these city-provided best practices for the community meeting. And like I said, I'll delve into that a little more. One final requirement, this is a simple one, but seems to be a good one to me, is that notification of registered, may or may not be the right word, of neighborhood associations that the city knows of, right? That they all get notified via email if one of these is occurring in that neighborhood. All right, so diving in a little deeper on a couple of these. A notice template, that's pretty self-explanatory, but we want to pull up and say there's a minimum amount of information you need to be giving folks on this, and this is probably not as viewable as I'd like it to be, but we're asking for a simple document that gives the answers to what, when, where, and who to contact, presents clearly what we're talking about, what location is being discussed, and then gets into what are we proposing there, so that as the neighbors go into these meetings, they know what to expect, right? I've seen them all over the place so far. I've seen notices that just say, we want to rezone this to build something, come talk to us about it. And that's hard for the neighbors to come in prepared with their questions or know what they want to get out of that meeting at that point. So let's talk about that one a little. Best practices guide, I just snipped the front page there, but this is a plain language 8-page guide that is geared towards both neighbors and developers, right? We want both sides of these meetings to be able to get the most of them. And among other things, it's going to outline the best practices for timing of meetings, location of meetings, content of meetings, communication, and providing post-meeting resources. There are hard guidelines contained in there, such as, here are the hours you need to target, and you need to explain to us why those hours weren't targeted when you scheduled your meeting. There are things about content of meetings, what you should talk about, what you should present. We have had neighborhood meetings where no plans for what they're talking about have been presented to the neighbors. But right now, our ordinance doesn't let us go to those developers and say, you didn't do what the ordinance says when they did that. So that's what we're trying to fix. And post-meeting resources is a big one. There are recommendations and guidelines on there. For larger projects, we recommend having the developer have their own informational website or something where people can go and refer back to this after the meeting. And also, this guide will provide guidance to meeting ordinance requirements. Because you know how ordinance language is, it's not always the easiest to follow. Meeting registration, I told you why these two things would be important. This one's really important, and we're going to talk about this. in this slide and a couple more. But we've created an online form that we're asking developers to report these meetings when they schedule them. And this allows city staff to check their mailing list to make sure they're correct, make sure everybody's being included that's supposed to be included, and to be informed of the meeting. Once those notices get out, it says call the developer, but 60% of the people call the city, and at this point, we don't even know what's happening. So we'd like to have the basic information to be able to say, this is what's happening, here's the contact, here's the meeting time and date, that kind of thing. And for me, the most exciting part is this is going to allow us to enable the future use of the Simplicity Development Notification Tool. Do y'all know what that is yet? Anybody signed up? Awesome. Okay. I'll talk about that a little more here in a minute, but we're going to expand that to be able to be used to provide expanded notice of these pre-development community meetings as well. And I'm going to come back around to that notification tool, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well, but that's a huge resource. Meeting reporting. This is the other form that we've developed that we're requiring these developers to submit before they submit an application to us. And this is important, of course, to verify all the requirements have been met and to create a standardized record of the meeting for inclusion with all staff reports in the file moving forward. Right now, with no guidelines, no guide rails on how you tell us your meeting was held and what happened at the meeting, we get varying things from 2 sentences to 2 pages, not a lot. But with this form, we're able to ask specific questions of the developer and get well, they can provide some interesting answers, I'm sure, sometimes, but to guide them in what information we want to receive. And something really important for us is also it standardizes data that is collected from metrics and reporting, because when we're asking the same question every time, we can come back and say it was answered this way this many times. So this is important for us as well. That second sub-bullet under allows city staff there is really important because this provides a perpetual record of that neighborhood meeting. If a decision maker or something goes to city council or wherever would like to, they can go back and see what was reflected in that neighborhood meeting. And that seems like important data for folks to have. All right, so I promised I'd come back to the CBD zoning thing. This is one area I've already gotten a couple of questions. So right now, the changes in that radius that we looked at are not proposed for properties within the CBD zoning. So section 7591, lots of numbers, right now requires notification be sent to all addresses and all property owners within the CBD. So by the nature of downtown, right, you know we have more density, we have more people, more addresses, more units, housing, commercial, whatever they may be, within that 200 feet than we do anywhere else in the city. It's a pretty wide net that's cast already at this point. And this is the one area when we went back to the Development Customer Advisory Group, remember the answer, that they really had an interest in having us look at, let's keep this at 200 in the CBD, downtown, because those lists already are hundreds and hundreds of names long. And by the nature of downtown, there is more density. It doesn't take as wide of a geographical area to cast as wide of a net. So that's one area we said, okay, we get it, 200 feet downtown, we'll move to 400 everywhere else in the city for those reasons. So I said I'd talk a little more about this. I always like to plug this because this is something we came out with several years ago. We call it the Development Notification and Information Tool. It's on the city's Simplicity website. But it does allow anyone, to go in, choose a geographic location in the city, presumably where you live, but you could choose some random other point in the city if you wanted to, and choose a geographic boundary, quarter mile, half mile, mile, and say, I want you to let me, you the city, to let me know about each of these types of development applications when they come in. And when people are registered for that, they get a simple email with a link that says a new development application has come in. That link directs them to a page with information and access to all the documents the city has on that application and contact information for city staff for more questions. So you see, it's kind of convenient. I don't know why there's a blank it's really faint. There's a blank checkbox down there that's not labeled. I don't know why that's there, but I was like, that's great, because that's where I'd like to see neighborhood meetings show up. But that would cast an even wider net, 400-foot radius outside of CBD, plus the simplicity tool, plus email notification required to neighborhood associations that we know of. Should get a lot more people informed. And those are just bullets of what I was talking about. Once we have the ordinance adopted, if things happen on schedule, we hope to have this rolled out in summer of 2023, so this summer. All right, repeating that, hopefully we understand how this is proposed at this point, but of course I can take any questions you have about it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much, Chris. I'm really glad to know that these are getting more specific and the length of time is increasing. I think of all the feedback from the last several years of living in Asheville, notification of meetings seems to rise to the top, people not feeling informed. So kudos to your office for trying to address some of those. One of the things that, when you said you're moving the timing from 10 days to 14 days, I think it's a great step in the right direction. Knowing that probably the last time this was made, we had a post office that was, in the Asheville area, that everything didn't have to be sent to Greenville. So my question may sound really specific, but I think it's a broader reality that I could mail something to my neighbor across the street and it may not get there for 7 days. So when we're talking about just 14 days, I wonder what the issue would be with it even expanding that much longer than 14, because say someone's out of town, I mean, there's a lot of things about the mail in Asheville that have changed.
Right.
So I keep thinking that's a great step from 10 to 14, but gosh, what about 3 weeks? What about 21 days?
Sure. And I feel like we did discuss that and ended up back at 14 upon going back out to that counterbalance, right? The other users of this system, well, it's a funny way to put it, but the people applying for development, but mostly we're represented by the people they hire, engineers and architects and things like that. Timing is a big thing with them because the process is so long already. And I'm not saying like, oh, that we shouldn't make it longer, that we couldn't consider that, but kind of what we looked at was, hey, we're going for conditional zoning, we're already looking at a 9-month process to get a project approved. So they can be a little sensitive about timing, but I hear your point for sure. I think we landed on the 14 as a counterbalance. I feel certain when we started with Coalition Asheville Neighborhoods that we were being asked, let's go longer than 14. But I'd have to go back and look and see exactly how long it took us to get to 14 and where we got there from. But I can certainly do that, yeah.
Peter?
So I applaud you and your group for streamlining this, and it sounds great. My questions have to do with something that may be off topic, but so if I'm out of line or you can't have a discussion with me, that's fine. Having been through one of these meetings, not in Asheville, but in another location, which was quite heated.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to understand that confirm that the report of the meeting is submitted with the submission for the project by the builder. So the builder is writing that report, okay? No city staff are in attendance? Okay. So and then how much weight then does this have with the city council? And I guess my red flag goes up when, it's sort of like the fox and the hen house. Again, this might be off topic, but I'm just curious of how how the neighborhood really, what power do they have?
Yeah, okay, so what I didn't say about the different levels of development is that it would be different depending on what we're looking at, right? We have the Unified Development Ordinance, which is our zoning, essentially, and it sets forth a certain level of project that all they have to do is meet the requirements in that code. So I said level 2 major subdivisions, those two right there are two that all they have to do is meet the minimum requirements of the code. So that, you know, it begs the question, well, is it disingenuous to hold a community meeting because they don't have to do anything we say? Our hope is that it starts that dialogue, and if there's some easy wins between the two groups, maybe something will happen, right? For those projects. Now, when we get above that, we get to those level 3s, which are the really, really big projects, 100,000 square feet, or anything they're changing the zoning on, and we're going to city council. It's a legislative decision, so really city council can consider anything they need to or want to make that decision. So neighborhood impact, in my years of doing this, neighborhood input can be a really big factor in conditional zoning decisions for various councils. And I think one of the things I saw pointed out here is creating a record of that carries on with this document as an appendix to a staff report or something like that, presents that information to the decision makers, might have an impact. In a kind of an idealistic mind, my hope is everybody gets together at these neighborhood meetings and agrees they all want the same things and everything, but I know that's not how it goes. But I hope that answered part of your question. So it can have an impact, and it may have an impact, but it doesn't always have to have an impact. And then as far as reporting, that's kind of why we're introducing these guidelines in how they report it and what we tell them we want to know about the meeting. We've gone back and forth with various folks that have helped us kind of to develop these regulations about, well, we have to tell them, they have to tell us this exact thing. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to tell them that. It's difficult to say, word it exactly like this and say it exactly like this. But what we can do is break it down by prompts. Who was there? What happened? What are the top 3 issues that were presented? And then we can say, upload a recording of the meeting, in which that form does ask for. So I'm hoping that addresses some of that by providing standardized data and asking for evidence of the meeting.
I have a follow-up question to Peter's question.
So did
I was just gonna say that it is required that the developers submit a report. Maybe we could encourage neighborhoods to prepare their own report that would become part of this little file.
Yeah. That'd be an easy add to the guide. I said the guide is for neighbors and developers, so if we could add that. Staff contact should be there, and we'll take it. We'll add it to the record.
The issue, it was a pleasure working with you on this.
Yeah, likewise.
Too, Ken, you did a lot of work with us, and you heard a lot of our concerns, so it's wonderful to see this here. My problem has been with the CZ, with not giving the information at the neighborhood meetings, and they will have things called conditions that they're not wanting to meet. And most on the CZ, it will go through the development before it gets to that condition place of what are they gonna ask for relief from and what are they not. So when you go to a neighborhood and they bring up what I call the dog and pony show, and they hold it all out there and go, ain't this grand? And then we take a look at what's going on behind it, that they're asking for relief of the UDO to ask for, that they don't want to do that. And that's where they'll go to city council and they'll say, well, we asked for that in our condition, and the council will go, well, they've asked for that in the condition, and they'll review how impactful that is on the development. The neighborhoods will not see that in the beginning for a couple of reasons. One, they don't want the neighborhoods to have a discussion about it. And 2, they haven't gotten that far in their development process to figure out, well, we don't want the 10-foot wide sidewalk, we only want to go 5 feet wide, and it may make a difference in the neighborhood. And that's where me, who wades through simplicity, knows how to read, and will get the neighbors, will call me and go, so what are they asking for that they're not gonna do? What have they showed us that they're not gonna do? And then I have to wade through everything and go, well, they're not gonna do this, they're not gonna do this, and they're not gonna do this. And so what I'm saying is that there doesn't seem to be a way to make the developers, when they're coming in with a CZ, to look at the neighborhood and go, well, we're not gonna meet our tree canopy ordinance. We're not gonna be able to make our open space. We're not gonna be able, most of the time it's buffers. We're not gonna be able to do our B buffer. We're gonna have to do an A buffer, which may impact the neighborhood right next to them. And that's a big deal for the neighborhoods. Now, level 2s and 3s, we generally see it ahead of time, but the CZs impact us the biggest. And the developers have got to come to us. And then that brings me, and I know I could go on, is that we have a spot on the staff report for the neighborhoods. And that brings the spot to the person that's reading the meeting, because I've been sending, and you've been getting the emails, I've been sending them through Patrick. They didn't say anything on this on this neighborhood meeting to the neighbors. Why didn't they say, do they have to do another neighborhood meeting? They should have to come back and explain more, and because they don't. And then you made a response back, and a couple of them, well, we're gonna make them do that, or they're gonna give us more information. So will that stuff go in the staff report, where whomever's reading the staff report is like I do with Urban Forestry Commission, and I make my notes, so they're gonna make a note and say, well, this needs to be responded to in the neighborhoods in another mailer or another meeting to let them know what's really going on. See what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. And I remember back some of these conversations that we had. And again, the hard part is quantifying change, right? So we as staff can only impart what the ordinance tells us we can impart. And so some of the changes that are qualitative, not that they don't affect communities, but that we can't necessarily say X change happened, make it very hard for us to write an ordinance that directs people back to another neighborhood meeting. And the changes can be so numerous, it's hard to tell what they're going to be. So I know that's a looming question, right? When do they need to come back to the neighborhood, right? When is this a new application? When is this changed enough that they need to reapproach them? And that's one area we don't have figured out yet for that reason. Because like you saw, the whole reason we're doing this now is that general code language that didn't support us as staff in enforcing the ordinance, right? Somebody gave us 2 sentences, we have to say, yeah, you officially met the code. Or we can tell them this isn't good, but then they say, well, this is what the code says, you can't stop me, or whatever, you know. We don't want to end up in that same situation. So, yeah.
I think that I appreciate what the proposals are, and I hope they go through, because in my neighborhood, we have to fight for ourselves. We have developers that want to come into our neighborhood. I'll give one instance where it's a residential neighborhood, and it always has been. And the developer wants to put 21 townhouses in a small area. Now, our association, we are directly involved with everything that goes on. The first meeting we had with them, they talked to us so bad. It was an embarrassment, the way they talked to us about what they wanted to do, and to actually say they wanted to come into our neighborhood because it was cheaper, the land was cheaper. This is what they said to us. Then they had to go back. And when they came back to us, again, we had a meeting. The people in the 200 radius, they didn't know that we had represented them and not wanting this to happen. And then they wanted to say, well, you know, first it was gonna be an office building, then it was gonna be townhouses, and they thought that we should be okay with that. And so we have said to them that if you want to, we can't tell you not to build houses, but build houses because it's a residential area, because they do need to rezone. They only have one area that they can put
Sure.
houses in. But I don't know what they go back and say, and we have to continuously look and see when they're gonna go to city council.
Yeah.
Because we did stop a development that was on the corner of Forest Street and Hendersonville Road, where somebody wanted to put up one of those big storage units, and we went all the way to city council. But we have to fight for ourselves, because the way the developers have been doing before your proposal, they didn't have to talk to the association or the community, or the radius was even smaller. So I do appreciate that, but someone needs to be at these meetings if it's gonna be recorded to you. Because if you're just waiting on the developers, the engineers, or the people that are doing it to give you a report on what was said at the meeting, we don't even trust them in the meeting, because they do talk, they talk to us really bad. And it's unfortunate, and I don't know about anybody else, but I've been in these things, you know, this is the third time I've had, you know, we've had people that want to come in and want to do development of large places, and they say affordable housing. And we don't consider it affordable, but if you're gonna put houses there, if you're talking about 21 townhouses, and the street is narrow, and that was our question, and everything else, they're all houses that people have owned.
Everything else around there, yeah.
Is a home.
Yep.
And I don't know if we're gonna continue to fight, but with this information, I'm glad when your proposal, if it goes through to the city, I hope, because we need to know when we need to meet again to fight even harder to stop this development. Because as I said to the man that owns the property, wants to build, I know you have the money. Just put houses. And I'm just asking you, just to put homes up, because our neighborhood has seniors. We have people that have been in their homes, generational homes, and we don't want to see townhomes, because that brings a whole different dynamic to our neighborhood. So I appreciate that. That was what I wanted to say.
Sure.
I have a couple of questions. You mentioned this best practices guide, and I just can't remember if you said if those guidelines are really just guidelines or if they're like binding guidelines.
It's a mix,
Okay.
right? I'm gonna say most of it, because the reason this stuff isn't in the proposed code is because it's really hard to make into code, right? Not every situation fits everything. And I've gone back and forth with people about timing of meetings because, okay, evening works for everybody who has a day job. But evening doesn't work for people in the service industry who work the night shift. So it's hard to find that universal
Right.
thing that works because it doesn't exist. So that's why we've set a lot of this up in that series of guidelines. And I'll be happy to, if I send a link to it to y'all, could you provide it to them after this and they could take a look at it?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it's 8 pages, some of it's boring, but there's some stuff in there that addresses even what you were just saying about how to conduct a meeting and how to communicate things we think humans know. But we've learned from time to time that a reminder is important. So things like that are guidelines, obviously. We can't project an application whether or not somebody was communicated well or was polite, but we can tell them this is how you have a productive meeting. So a lot of it is that, but there are some windows that says, you know, this is what convenient means, this is what convenient time means, and talks about what your options are for holding meetings. You know, coming out of COVID, the virtual meeting is still an option for people. And honestly, I've seen higher participation in most meetings because that option's there. But when we talk with people, we encourage them, know your audience, right?
Wendy's got.
Oh, sorry.
Did you have another
I
question?
had one more question.
Yeah.
About this waiting period
Mhm.
between when the meeting happens and when, what comes after that?
Just, let's say
Any more
that's,
progress
they're
on it?
eligible to file an application for it
Okay,
after
the
that time.
application.
Yeah.
And I imagine the idea here is that the developer might make changes to their plan based on the neighborhood meeting. And I can't remember, you said something about most of the time nothing really happens during that.
Yeah, I don't want to sugarcoat it. Most of the time, nothing happens during that.
Okay.
If we see a plan before that, we see it come back after. And there's been a lot of them over the years, so I can't pull them out of my head and say, this one, they made a small change on, but I know there've been one or two. So it's not completely bleak,
Right.
but.
Well, and at least this way, there'll be a little bit more documentation of what the concerns actually were and if there is a response by the developer or not.
Right, and what I heard working with Ken and Sharon was in that group was, hey, we want a record of what happened at that meeting. If they promised us something, we'd like something to show that, so we can come back at the end and be like, hey, either developer, you promised us you didn't do it, or hey, city council, they told the neighborhood things they're not doing, whatever that might be. I know that record was important, so.
Mr. Collins, thank you so much for all this information. I do have a suggestion on best practices, and that is pertaining to your signs. They are too small. They need to be larger. Everybody's shaking their head, yes. You drive by quickly, you don't see all the information that's necessary. You have no space to park the car, you can't get out, you can't get the information, and yet you wonder, what does this entail? What is this encompassing? This is the first I've heard of it. So there's a lot of anxiety that's built into that, and the signs need to be larger for everyone to be able to read easy, better font, something another way. And then one of the questions that came up is that after the first meeting, and there is a lot of input from the neighborhood, and the developer goes back and say, well, we understand your dilemma and your questions, and we're going to go back to the drawing board. Will there be a second meeting by the developer to inform everyone instead of having to read this information in the newspaper that's 3 or 4 days late? So those are the things that I would like to see implemented along the best practices, that notification would be, if there's going to not be another meeting, it would be announced at that meeting, the first meeting, so everybody is very much aware what's going to happen next, the next steps.
Okay, yeah, I
But the
think
signs need to be big.
tackling that backwards, two things. So
Okay.
we can definitely incorporate that into the best practices guide. The great thing about it not being in the ordinance is we can make minor updates to it without having to go through, you know, a 4-month process. And that's really good. And with the signs, there's 2 types of signs. The signs that we're talking about tonight, which are those that will be put up by the developer. So our template we're proposing, or not proposing, we were proposing to require them is larger than what you've probably seen for most of those. The second type are the signs the city posts about rezoning hearings
Yes,
and
the
things like that.
rezoning.
I'm gonna be really honest, they're not good signs. Sorry, but you'll be really happy. We have a staff member who's been working really hard on a new, large, yellow
Yes,
sign
right.
for these.
Something to catch your attention.
It looks great, and he's working on it, but
Well, that
like a lot
needs
of
to go
city
over
staff,
to
he's working on a lot
planning.
of things, but it's
as
there,
well.
yeah. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Aspire, which is the Baptist church.
Mhm.
Now, that's a master plan that's coming through. That's going to run a little differently because it's so large from what I normally see and review. That, when I looked at that and they brought it to Easton Valley, it's not going to end up looking like that. So for me, for the neighborhood, that one, because there's so many things that are going to have to change with that. They show trees that aren't going to be there. They show green space that aren't going to be there. It's just not going to be. Showing entrances that are probably not going to be there. It's going to look different. And I think with something like that, and I know they have pre-application meetings, that is going to require another meeting to come with those changes. Or the developer's got to go a little further along in its development process before they come to a neighborhood meeting, because in my estimation, that's going to change a lot. Now, for me, that's a lot. It may not be for the development community a lot.
And it could, and for everybody, Sharon's talking about YMCA, Baptist Church, the whole Woodland Block
Oh,
development
yeah.
that's in right now. So the way that's being handled right now is a master plan, and you mentioned conditions. There's going to be conditions that break down how each phase is reviewed after that initial council review. And I can suggest to the planner working on it that exploring one of those conditions being holding a neighborhood meeting for each one of those, because they're going to be treated like level twos each phase, which would inherently require a neighborhood meeting. So I don't want to make any promises right now, but I can put that out there and see what, yeah.
Right, but the whole plan's gonna go to council.
Right.
And so council's gonna look at this plan that's gonna change, that the neighbors haven't seen. And then it's gonna be broken down into the phases of it that will be within the UDO requirements. But they're gonna have a huge amount of lists of conditions that they're gonna ask for that we don't know. I can kind of sort of guess by looking at it. I'm not a planner, but I've
Yeah.
sat around long enough to know. So what I'm saying is that by the time it goes to council, and I'm the only one disseminating information to the neighborhood that this is what this is gonna look like, we need to rally and talk about the fact that they're not gonna make their open space, or they're not gonna make their sidewalks, or whatever it is that they're trying not to make, because once council approves that, then there's nothing to be said when it goes to a level 2 or level 3, a level 2 when they divide it up. Now, I don't know if the rest of you know what I'm talking about, but what's my concern with this, as what happened with Charlotte Street, and my concern is that the neighbors didn't know what was gonna happen until after it had already blown up in everybody's face. And for the developer's sake and for the neighbor's sake, for everybody's sake, it shouldn't be a blow-up thing. It should be, everybody should know what's going on and have an opinion, whether it works through council or it doesn't work for council, and not be these emergency things that we end up with.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question that I'm kind of not confused about. And she brought it up, Elise brought it up. If we have the 10 or the 14-day period, and then you have a meeting, then you asked about the next steps. If it has to be rezoned, doesn't it have to go to planning and zoning before it goes to city council? If the area has to be rezoned, am I correct?
Yes, you are correct.
How long is that? Do you have an idea of a window of what that process is before it actually gets to council? Because I know council changes all the time. I look for their agendas. I don't think that some things have gone to planning and zoning, but I don't know if that's what you were, want to know what the next steps were. If it's something that has to be rezoned, then it has to go before the planning and zoning board. And they're the ones that would be, saying what we think about your plans and what you, am I correct?
Yeah, so-
What about the development and how they would have to actually show this? That is an opportunity. I've been in that meeting too. That's an opportunity where the neighborhoods can actually go to that meeting and they can actually voice their opinion on why they do not think that that's a good fit. And I know there was some property on London Road in West Chapel that used to be Haynes' store, and a developer bought it. And when he showed the plans, it was much huger than what he ended up buying. It's still not good, but he was gonna put more houses. He's gonna cram more houses, and he wanted to have garage apartments. And we kind of, after going to council, planning and zoning, talking to him, they tell you all kind of things like they said. But he did reduce it down, but he was still able to build. But yeah, anytime it's a rezone, it has to go to planning and zoning. And so I think that, if that's something that you can put in your proposal, that the communities are aware, totally aware when it goes to planning and zoning, so people in that area can show up to actually tell planning and zoning about what they think is going on, or what they don't like.
Yeah, we can certainly work towards that.
I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
thank you.
Isn't that on Simplicity already?
It is. So the Simplicity tool that I mentioned, it'll track those dates for you. Version 2 at some point will have a button where you can hit subscribe, and it'll tell you when things change. But we're not there yet. We got the usual not enough resources in the city to get everything done, but we want fast enough. But we're working towards it.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for coming in tonight and
Sure.
providing the update. I had a question about the CBD limit for 200 feet. What was the justification for deciding to notify residents and tenants versus property owners?
So it's, in the CBD, it's both.
Okay.
And the reason being, I'm gonna think back to way back when that was first. The reason being, well, density is the main word, right? You just have a lot more people doing business and occupying structures that may or may not be property owners in the CBD than you do anywhere else.
Okay.
And that's because of the density, right? So that's why we wanted to capture more than just property owners out there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have one more final comment, because I know that, and I know we've had a lot of questions for you, so again, thank you for your time. It seems like that this is real, the city, and especially your group, is really trying to put some teeth behind some things that they didn't have the authority or written part, trying to get to the letter of the ordinance. Is there, say a developer comes in and they go by the the minimums and they send out notifications. It's not a good time of the meeting. They don't have many people show up. Their report is pretty minimal. Do you have in these proposals specific criteria for that accountability that says you did not meet these things, so you have to go back and redo this differently?
I would love to have that criteria.
Nice.
Yeah. As much as I don't like how I call it squishy language of the current code, time and place and convenience is something we couldn't crack the code of on how to really codify what that means. Now, I'll say if it's something that goes forward in an active neighborhood and their roster shows 2 people showed up for the meeting, we're probably going to ask some questions. But knowing a way how to objectively do that, it's kind of the human staff element. So we tried to give ourselves a little more teeth in there, but not that many teeth on that one still. I would say too, though, you can always reach out to our office if something happens in your neighborhood and you're like, wow, they scheduled this for 11 p.m. on a Christmas Eve or whatever. Let us know and ahead of time, and then we can get ahead of it as well. So.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. You gave us some good information. Well, will you be able to, the link that you were gonna send to them, is this all of this that you had up here today?
The link I was gonna send would be the best practices guide or anything y'all want. We can get it to you. Yeah, that as
I
well.
would like to be able to, at my association meeting, be able to give out some of this information. Especially for your the proposed portion, so that people get a better understanding.
Excellent.
I love that.
Can I get, we get the link to that page, which was the communication option page? I'd like to pass that on to my neighborhood.
Sure, absolutely.
That we can put in the zip code, I guess.
Oh, for registering for meetings, yeah.
Register. and
Register for
then-
the notifications, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Like
proposals for development
Mhm.
would be, yeah.
It's in my notes.
Okay.
Thank you.
She's gonna get it. She's gonna get it. Thank you.
Great.
We
Well, thank you all.
appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good night.
So much work. Okay, so we kind of like coming down to the end now. Multimodal transportation. Elizabeth?
Yes, we, Multimodal Transportation Commission met last week, and we had 2 or 3 main items on the agenda that took up most of the time. One of those was the plans for the I-26 connector and the parts that were, I may be using the wrong language, approved, and I don't remember the actual numbers, but there were, of the sections, we talked about 2 sections and looked at what they had proposed for the bike lanes, the pedestrian lanes, the multi-use lanes, the vegetation, the barriers, and we had a lot of conversation about having bikers next to these lanes without any kind of physical barrier, rather than just a 3-foot section. We're like, we hope you don't swerve into us. talking about what we could put there, and my understanding was, one of the things that was important to know is that they needed to have some leeway if there were some emergencies in those lanes and people needed to pull over. So there was a lot of really good discussion about what that would look like, and across the bridge and where that would go, and then how it would connect to the greenway that would continue up Riverside Drive, sort of the next phase of that they were working on. Other things were just new members and speed limit changes, that we've been looking at the speed limit change. I think it's 35 in general unless it's posted differently, but there are a lot of streets we've learned around Asheville that don't have posted speed limits. So a lot of the changes were enacting things that made sense, and there were several decreases where it was 35, decreasing it to 25 or 20. So the main flavor of that was to look at what is a reasonable speed limit, and most of those were decreases. I don't think there was anything that was an increase. So little by little, sections around town are being completed that maybe didn't have a speed limit. Other than that, I think just recruiting for some new members. And one piece of information that's interesting is that there are not often vacancies on the Multimodal Transportation Commission, from what I understand, what they talked about. So when we were looking at recruiting people, some of these people's applications were from last summer. So, and I don't know if that's typical of other commissions, but if you know people that were interested in that a while back, I think they're sort of going through the list and seeing if people were still interested. So those were the main points.
Sharon?
I don't know if everybody's been following the trees on Vermont Street. So unfortunately, what you read in the paper isn't always necessarily true, and you can only write so many letters to the editor to correct things. The Urban Forestry Commission was deeply involved in working with the city for a couple of years. I was involved in that along with other people. And it's unfortunate, but the trees were too big and too old and a lot of them were at what we call end-of-life trees. And I'll be dead and gone, and somebody else's family will enjoy the new trees that are being planted. We save more than what was going to come out. And but when you've got an end-of-life tree and you've got sidewalks that will be pushed up, and you've got transportation issues, ADA issues, and some trees just have to come out and new ones come in that are more suited for that area. But the Urban Forestry Commission did spend 2 years working with the city to make it better than what it was, and wasn't a clear-cut situation, but it was best in the situation. And then also we were involved in the situation on the golf course, and I've got an email saying that they removed some trees that were not to be removed. I was not involved in that, but we did drop down the amount of trees to be removed, and then they're going to plant other trees. I was not involved in that, but the Urban Forestry Commission was deeply committed to that and spent a lot of time on that and did make recommendations. So we've been following it thoroughly. Have there trees been removed that were not supposed to be removed? I don't know. That'll probably be discussed at our next meeting next week. So that's what's going on with the Urban Forestry Commission.
Can I make a comment about the Vermont Street trees?
Yes.
I live on Brevard Road, which is just 2 streets over from Vermont, and I'm really glad you brought up the points that you did. I know it's kind of like, you can't say that you want to cut down a tree like these days, but these trees were sick, and the sidewalks there are horrendous. They're literally pushed up like this. They're not ADA compliant at all. And so while I know that people were very, very attached to these trees and the character that it gave that street, it really needed to be done. And I know that it was a long process. They put out a lot of different suggestions of taking out the trees here or here, and parking and different little places that come out where they plant trees.
Yeah.
Talking, I think they even spoke to the property owners so they could pick which they offered several options, and they got to pick what they wanted in front of their house, so yeah, I thought they handled everything really well.
Yeah, gee, thank you for that.
Sharon, just real quickly, a clarification, which golf course are you talking about?
Community.
Oh, the one in Beverly Hills?
Muni. Munis.
Okay, thank you.
So the agenda items for next or upcoming meeting, we're gonna ask that the Human Relations Commission to come in and to tell us about some of the things that they're doing. Good. And it will not just be limited to them. If there are any other organizations that you would like for us, that you'd like for us to have to come to see, to give us a talk on what they're doing and how can we help, if we can engage with them, to let us know. And we'd be more than happy to have them to come in and just give us a presentation on what their guidelines are, because I do have a friend that is now on the Human Relations Commission, and she said they want to be more involved with neighborhoods. So if that's what they want to do, that's what's going to happen. So we're going to give them the opportunity to come in and we can see, and that would be nice that as we get ready for the festival, since we're talking about that, if the forestry could come during that festival and give some information or talk about the trees, somebody, it might be good if I get you some fish.
Now, if we do the fish fry,
You'll
I'll
come.
be there, yeah.
Yeah, I know, but it would be interesting for people to know about different things that that are going on in the city and organizations that we do not know about. So we're gonna, Councilperson Kim Roney, would you like to have some words with us this evening and close us out?
I would love to. Thank you for the invitation, Babette. So a couple things. First, thank you all for your service. Glad to be here with you today. I wanted to follow up with the report that you gave for multimodal. Thank you so much for being the liaison. When you were referring to the Aesthetics Committee recommendation, I just wanted to let all of you know that we made, in addition to the Aesthetics Committee recommendation, which is the betterments that improve how the future, the I-26 connector project will function and be connected. Also, there's some safety elements in there, as well as the visual impact and the environmental impact. But one of the things that a majority of council also passed was a recommendation for staff to write a letter of support for neighborhoods that will be impacted by the project. Explicitly named were Montford, Burton Street, and Hillcrest. Now, the Hill Street neighborhood was deeply impacted by the highway expansion years ago. So DOT is going to do some outreach with the Residents Council at Hillcrest. If the Residents Council has recommendations, it could look like a letter in support of those recommendations. Second thing, there are openings on our boards and commissions. We did talk about this at the Equity and Engagement Subcommittee of Council, which is new. We're looking at considering quarterly appointments to our boards and commissions. One of the benefits of that would be some of our publications in Asheville are monthly publications. I think of specifically like the Urban News or La Noticia. And so if we're doing a monthly opening and then we send it to a publication, that the window would close before the next publication, it's a missed opportunity to do that kind of outreach. So keep an eye out for that. We always have openings, so do help us spread the word. And then also I wanted to point out the work that you do on the Urban Forestry Commission and the comments that were made about Vermont. When we have better planning that's informed by our neighborhoods, we can get in front of those kinds of situations where we were trying to do trees in the same place of sidewalks. So I just wanted to say again, thank you for the work that you do so that we can have a better planned and livable and equitable community, not just for us, but for future generations. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone have any last comments? We welcome you. Is it
Jake,
Jake?
yes,
Welcome you.
thank you.
Glad you had your input. You wouldn't quite sit beside Peter all the time and then you'll talk. because Peter can make anybody talk. Yes.
I have one more comment. I forgot about the Multimodal Transportation Commission, and this is actually something that is sort of time sensitive. There is a W&C Rail Committee we haven't had rail to Asheville since 1975, from my understanding, the passenger rail. There is a proposal, and they're asking for letters of support. I can email this and forward it if people are interested, to say, to Cheryl Collins at the North Carolina DOT. It's, the deadline is March 1st. We just got this today. But said we could use a letter of support. If you could write one, email it to Cheryl Collins, and I have that email that I can forward.
So where would that rail, WC?
It's from
rail-
Salisbury, from what I understand,
Yeah.
Salisbury to Asheville.
Asheville, and it would be, because the old one was in Biltmore, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
So yes, we got it this.
Oh, I love
So
it.
again, we're talking about lots of different ways to connect to Asheville multimodal situations. So
That would be
Asheville
good.
from Salisbury. So I can forward this to the committee if you want to write a letter of support. Yeah.
All right then. Well, I guess we can get, I'm gonna hit this gavel. I forget every time that we start the meeting, but my hand is just saying,